He hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. The letters from the bank were piling up on the kitchen table, the kind of letters you stop opening because you already know what they say. He was 47 years old. He had worked every single day of his adult life. He had nothing. And on a grey Tuesday morning in October 1992, George Bolton walked out into his backfield with a spade, not to find treasure, just to dig a drainage ditch. At 18 inches deep, the spade hit something. A sound like a bell being struck underground, and the life George Bolton had known, the debt, the struggle, the 14 years of barely surviving, was over. What came next was the kind of story historians write about, the kind archaeologists dream about, the kind that ordinary people read and refused to believe. But it happened. Every single word. To understand what George found, you have to understand what was buried, and why. Lincolnshire, England, Roman Britain. Approximately 300 AD, the Roman Empire was fracturing. After 2.5 centuries of relative stability in Britain, of roads, of cities, of legions keeping order, the center was beginning to give way. Usurper emperors rose and fell every few years. Barbarian groups tested the northern borders with increasing violence. The economy was in chaos. Roman currency was being debased. Less silver, more base metal, and nobody trusted the system anymore. The wealthy did what the wealthy always do when empires collapse. They buried their money. All across Roman Britain, aristocrats, merchants, and military officers were digging holes in the floors of their villas, in the corners of their estates, in the quiet backfields of their properties, and they were hiding everything of value: gold coins, silver ingots, jeweled military decorations, family heirlooms. They buried it with the full intention of coming back. Many of them did not come back. Rome withdrew its legions from Britain in 410 AD. The roads fell apart, the cities emptied, the villas burned or simply decayed, and beneath the soil across thousands of fields that would eventually become the English countryside, fortunes sat undisturbed, waiting for someone who would never return, or for someone who hadn't been born yet. George's family had farmed this specific patch of Lincolnshire since the 1920s. 3 generations: his grandfather, his father, then him. None of them had ever found anything unusual. In 70 years of working this land, plowing, draining, planting, harvesting, nothing had ever come to the surface that shouldn't be there. The Romans who buried that hoard had chosen well. The chest was at 18 inches, deep enough to avoid disturbance by normal plowing, which in Roman Britain, and for most of English agricultural history, rarely went deeper than 10 to 12 inches. It was in a back corner of the field, away from the main cultivation area, and it had been packed tightly enough, and buried carefully enough, that 1,700 years of English weather had done almost nothing to it. When George's spade struck the chest that October morning, it was essentially in the same condition it had been the day it was buried. He got down on his knees, scraped with the spade, then with his fingers. The soil was darker here, ancient disturbed earth, packed hard by centuries of compression. He widened the hole carefully, began to see the edges of the object. Bronze casing, heavily oxidized, green-black with age. But the sound it had made when the spade struck it, that was the sound of density. Weight. Something packed full inside. He lifted it out of the ground with both hands. It was heavier than he expected. He set it on the edge of the drainage trench and just looked at it for a moment. Then he opened it. Later, George would struggle to describe what he saw in those first seconds. He had seen gold before. Everyone has. Jewelry, coins, the occasional antique, but nothing prepares you for the sight of ancient gold. The specific warm, almost orange tone of high-purity Roman aurei coins, undimmed by 1,700 years underground. The coins were packed in tight columns. Face up, face down, face up. The portraits of long-dead emperors, repeating over and over in the cold October light. Between the columns of coins, flat silver ingots. 6 of them, each one roughly the size of a large smartphone. Each one stamped with Latin text, names, weights, mint marks. And at the corners of the chest, tucked in with extraordinary care for military brooches. Each one a masterwork of Roman craftsmanship. Bronze frames, inlaid garnets. The stones, as George would later learn, had traveled to Roman Britain from what is now Sri Lanka. Someone had paid an enormous price for these. The total number of individual artifacts in the chest, 312. But the excavation wasn't over. When the archaeologists arrived and began their systematic examination of the site, they found more.
The chest had been the primary deposit, but around it, buried individually and carefully, were additional items. A gold pendant, a silver bowl, 47 additional coins, a bronze stylus with a gold tip, final total, 847 individual artifacts. A truly astonishing find. The archaeological team spent 3 weeks on George's land, working tirelessly. George fed them tea every morning. He watched them work with a feeling of being outside his own life, like watching a film of something that happened to someone else, a surreal experience. The inquest process under British treasure law is meticulous and unhurried. The coroner's inquest alone took 4 months, a testament to its thoroughness. Specialists from the British Museum, the Ashmolean, and several universities examined every single artifact. They dated them, catalogued them, and argued over their origins and meaning. The gold coins spanned a 20-year period, roughly 285 to 305 AD. This suggested the hoard had been accumulated over decades, not buried all at once in a single crisis. Someone had been collecting this wealth carefully and consistently. The military brooches were the most extraordinary find. Similar brooches had been found before, but always individually, always in poor condition. 4 together, in this condition, was without precedent in British archaeological history. The garnet inlays were subjected to spectrographic analysis. They were confirmed to have originated in South Asia. These trade networks were among the most sophisticated in the ancient world. These weren't trinkets, they were investments. Whoever owned this hoard was wealthy, educated, connected, and very careful. And then they were gone, leaving their legacy buried. The formal valuation, completed after all analysis was finished, was staggering: £3,840,000. Under the British Treasure Act, George Bolton received the full amount. He sat in his kitchen with the letter and read the number 4 times. Then he put the kettle on. Because that's what farmers do. He paid the bank within the week, every penny. The loan officer called to express surprise. George thanked him politely and hung up. He paid his suppliers. He paid back a loan from his brother that was 15 years old. He bought the neighboring farm, the one the corporation had acquired, at a fair price. He expanded his land. He hired 2 farmhands for the first time in his life. He fixed the tractor. He built a house on the east edge of the property for his daughter. She had been living in a cramped flat in Lincoln, saving money she could never quite accumulate fast enough. He gave to the village church. He gave to the local school. And then he went back to work. Because that's what George Bolton does. Every October, on the anniversary of the find, he goes back to that specific spot. The drainage ditch was completed. The hole was filled. The grass came back and covered everything. You could walk right over it and never know. But George knows. He knows the exact distance from the old oak on the east fence. He knows the slight dip in the ground, a subtle memory of disturbed earth. He stands there in October, and he thinks about that Roman, the one who dug this hole 1,000 100 years ago with hands that looked nothing like George's, but were doing exactly the same thing, protecting something precious from an unpredictable world. That Roman packed the chest, lowered it into the ground, covered it carefully, patted the earth flat, and walked away thinking, "I'll come back for this." George stands on that spot every year, and he's grateful that that Roman never did. Somewhere under this world, there are thousands more. Fields that have never been questioned, gardens that have never been excavated, hillsides that have carried their secrets through empires, plagues, and centuries, without a single soul knowing. This is the world beneath the world, and it's still full. If you want to know what else has been found, what other impossibilities have come out of the ground, and changed ordinary lives into extraordinary ones, subscribe. Because we have stories that will make this one look like a beginning, and in a sense it is.